very warm welcome to One Slot. My name is Felicity Ezewuike. Thank you for joining us. In the 90s, 9 out of 10 of the world's bloodiest conflict was in Africa. Today, conflict persists on the continent despite efforts to stop them. Oftentimes, even those emerging from conflict are repeatedly plunged back into renewed violence. Countries like Mali, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, the Central African Republic and South Sudan come to mind. This disturbing trend is raising questions about the effectiveness of the tools and mechanisms of the African peace and security architecture, and in particular, the work of the African Union, AU, on post-conflict reconstruction and development, PCRD for short. Now, the PCRD policy framework is described as a guide for the development of comprehensive policies and strategies to address the needs of countries emerging from conflict, prevent escalation of disputes, avoid a relapse into violence, address the root causes of conflict, and build up state institutions to help consolidate stability and peace. With the help of my guest, Kevino, Tchatcho, we will examine African Union's post-conflict peacebuilding and reconstruction policy framework, the rationale behind it, and the challenge of implementation. Mr. Tchatcho is a governance expert, an analyst and program expert at the African Union Commission. He joins us from Ethiopia. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, it's true that I'm actually based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, but I'm taking the call from Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay. Can you tell us what a post-conflict reconstruction and development is about?
Okay. Thank you very much. As you all know, issues of conflict and issues of managing conflict all about issues back in the days, almost, if I may say, almost 16, 17 years old, if I may say, even almost 2 decades ago. So one of the things the African Union decided to do was in 2006, at the summit in Banjul in July 2006, they decided, we need a framework or a policy that will help guide Africa into coming out from this conflict through the right processes and through the right ways. So then came in the proposal for a policy framework to be developed called the Post-Conflict Reconstruction Development Framework, which was adopted in 2006 at the Banjul Summit in July 2006. So that is all where Genesis about where this framework came about. Now, going forward, the African Union has been trying and putting mechanisms, of course, to set up and establish and implement this framework. So, first of all, putting the institutional framework in terms of having the center, having a secretariat, or having like a structure that is going to implement the framework for the continent. So, in 2011, January 2011, the government of Egypt came with the proposal for the establishment of the PCRD Center that is going to be the main agency in Africa to push in the mandate as well as the aspiration and the objectives of the post-conflict development framework. So that was then reiterated again at the recent summit in 2020, just before the advent of COVID-19, which started on 15 March 2020 in Africa exactly. In February, at this summit, the member states emphasized on the need for this policy framework to quickly be implemented, given the conditions, the current conflictual conditions of the continent, through fast-tracking the operationalization of the post-conflict and regional development center, which is going to be based in Cairo, Egypt. So the mandate of this center is basically, like you said, to implement the spirit and the aspiration of the PCRD framework in identified context. That is, when I mean identified context, I mean countries which are undergoing conflicts, those going through conflicts, and above all, those going through political transitions. So basically, that's the role and the mandate that the center is going to be. So at the moment, we are currently in the process of setting up the center in Egypt, operationalizing it, for it to be fit for purpose and start properly its implementation as per the prescribed mandate.
That center has been launched already, hasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, the center was launched last year under the leadership of His Excellency Commissioner, His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adeoye, the Commissioner for Political Affairs and Security. It was launched. So now we're in the process of operationalizing in terms of setting up the offices, starting the recruitment processes, initiating and developing some programs, creating some kind of network, coordination network, partnership network with relevant stakeholders, partners, and so on and so forth. So basically, in terms of giving a quick introduction of what the PCRD is, where we come from and where we're heading to, that is what I can say for now. Thank you.
All right, we'll come back to the importance of that center that was launched. But before that, I want to ask why post-conflict reconstruction and development is so important.
Why PCRD is so important?
Yes, why PCRD is so important, because there seems to be a lot of attention on ensuring that it succeeds.
Yes. Every conflict that happens most often of the time, whether being man-made or whether being through natural causes or whatever, every conflict being made at the end of the day is costly. And if it's costly, we as Africa, and especially as Africa, we know what we have, especially over the past 2 decades, we know what we have put in terms of investing on the ground to support, the recovery and the reconstruction of those countries going to conflict. I mean, notably, we know Central African Republic for the past how many years now, we have been there. We closed the mission now, we are going back again. I mean, there are so many countries, South Sudan, Somalia, all of these countries are countries where we have gone, we have tried to put in peace agreements were made, but then the peace agreements were violated, and things went south. And the conflict is persisting and persisting. A lot of countries, like you mentioned, Mali, recurring conflicts and all of that. So for us, yes, it's also important to note that the PCRD has been there before, but yes, the emphasis is now is on the fact that we have discovered that the management of conflict is so costly. So for us, we believe that PCRD will not only bring an aspect of course, recovery and reconstruction in those countries affected, but it also bring now what we are calling peace building within that context. Because we believe that PCRD is not only about recovery and reconstruction, but as well as bringing that peace dividend, creating that energy about peace building in that nation, so that 3 things can be achieved. One, you will be able to assess the past, where the conflict, what led into the conflict, and why you want to assess the past. You nurture the present in terms of, yes, now we're in the present, now this is looking for stabilization and looking for hope for a future and a better country and everything. And then you stabilize, you sustain the future. So basically that is what PCRD is there for. So for us, we believe PCRD will not only be an instrument to review and properly address the issues, the root cause of conflict, as well as develop the country, but it's also going to be an element to strengthen peace, to bring in peace building, to say, okay, based on what happened in these countries and what has been spent, and in terms of what the efforts, the energy has been put, we don't want to go through such things. So before any other country will go, we want to, let's say, even if it's true to political issues, conflict sometimes they are coming through different issues, whether it's violence or conflict or citizens violence or a couple of risings. There's always one reason or another why conflict arises. So basically, it's to say, yes, don't do that. Yes, this country went through that, and this is what PCRD had to go through, and this is the kind of costly expenditure we have to do. So it's better for us to go through the ways of peace. So for us, PCRD is very important now, because it's also going to that development agency for those countries that are going through conflict. That they can be able to stabilize in the future.
Okay, what are some of the key elements or pillars, if you like, of the post-conflict reconstruction development?
Okay, basically the PCRD policy tomorrow has 6 key pillars, very important. And those 6 key pillars actually, when you go through them, you will see they're actually cross-cutting and they touched all the different kind of components that any country will want to develop while kind of managing a wide where we want to be in terms of the different agendas, even whether it's national agendas of countries or whether it's even international global agendas. The first one is the security pillar. And the security pillar was saying that please kindly put all the provisions for you to have those security measures in place, such as DDR. DDR is the disarmament and organization reintegration. How do you disintegrate and demobilize and reintegrate, for example, oppositions or maybe those who were, let's say, maybe the rebels and everything. At the end of the day, once there's a kind of political transition or there's kind of a truth and reconciliation, you will need to integrate with them to the society. How do you address the issue of SSR, security sector reform, and all those that come with issues of security in our countries? So there's what the first pillar addresses. The second pillar addresses issues of humanitarian affairs. So basically, we are saying during period of and here the humanitarian pillar doesn't only focuses on when the conflict is actually man-made. It also can be through conflict that are natural causes such as flooding and everything. At the end of the day, it's PCRD. So humanitarian context was saying, how do we help to address issues of migration, mobility from one area where there's conflict to another area, and then be able to also address resource and management of resources of those migrants that are there. That's number one. Number two, how do you also reintegrate those migrants within the national activities of those countries that they are now being placed or being a refuge in. Number three, how do you tap on the dividend as well as the capital of this migrants? Because at the end of the day, they will have to go back to school, they will have to do something. So how do you invest on their talents or the hidden talents they have and the capital to be able to boost and build those countries where they are refuge? The third pillar is basically political governance and transition, which is very important. How do we improve our governance mechanisms so that at the end of the day, we are going to have a better political process in terms of our political plans and agendas in different countries? How do we ensure proper transition in terms of, let's say, if the government is finishing its term, how do we ensure that proper political transition into a new government or into the new aspirations that we are trying to get? So that's what the third pillar seeks. And the fourth pillar is basically socioeconomic governance. So you see, like socioeconomic governance is basically cross-cutting. And also it's important to know that post-conflict development is not only issues of political affairs and security, but it's a cross-cutting issue which will involve everyone to be on board, from the economic arena, from the trade arena, ACFT, from the development arena, from the gender kind of arena, from everything. Everything is going to be there. That is why the fourth pillar, socioeconomic integration and all of that, really is cross-cutting and brings on board all the different other thematic areas. And the fifth pillar is human rights and transitional justice. So, of course, why do PCRD you have to take into you have to take on board and not to forget issues of human rights, child rights, women rights, and all of that in those contexts. And the fifth pillar, which is again cross-cutting and really nice, is issues of gender, women, and youth. How do we have to make sure we take into account all those three in the process of PCRD? It's very important and vital. Yep. In order to achieve those 6 pillars, we now have to make sure that we do proper coordination and partnership, which is for us a very important principle so that we can implement the 6 pillars.
These are broad areas, anyone would say. Are there specifics? I know that the activities are usually integrated. You have the short term, the medium term, and the long term. How does this, what would you describe as the short term, and what would you describe as the medium term and the long term goals in the policy as captured?
Anyway, so you see, for us, like you mentioned, the policy, of course, aims first of all, the policy, one of the areas of the policy is to be able to do timely, concrete interventions, timely and concrete interventions that will help to kind of address the current issues that are ongoing. So one of the things that we do in terms of course, short term is to be able to, like, first of all, assess, like, go to those countries that are undergoing those contexts. We do what we call a field assessment and need assessment. to be able to assess what are the urgent needs that for the country to be able to at least get back to the state, or also to be able to address some of the local community needs. Because remember, at the end of the day, we want to be able to be there for the local people and address the needs of those communities at the grassroots level. So we assess, and then we do what we call quick impact projects or peace strengthening projects. So those projects are basically there to come in quickly and have like a quick impact, short impact to the level. For example, for example, if you look at Burundi last year, we supported the people of Lake Tanganyika who suffered from the flood, and they had to be displaced. They had to be displaced to mountainous regions where we had to put refugees camps and everything for them. So, as part of the joint coordination support effort for these refugees with other international partners such as United Nations, ICS, and everything, we decided to contribute as AU. What our support will be to dispatch a total number of, if I may correct, 100,000 health sanitary kits to the young women in those regions for them to be able to take care of themselves. The hygienic conditions, also giving the hygienic conditions. So these are the kind of quick impact projects, short region where you can easily have the tangible impact at that moment and everything. Of course, in terms of medium impact now, you have now where you can now, in terms of the needs of the countries, of course, you have now, let's for example, dispatch some experts in the important areas where they will need to be built, such as experts, an electoral experts, for example, a constitutionalism and rule of law expert, a human rights expert, a governance or a governance and program, as well as a program expert. Those are experts that will be able to come and, let's say, stay for a longer period, let's say 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and be able to help the countries assess and identify where those things that are lacking, what needs to be refined and needs to be brought on board, while they are completing the transition.
Yeah, it's really important to break it down so somebody watching can understand what we're talking about. Yeah. This would be a good point to go on a very short break. When we come back, the conversation will certainly continue. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Kevino is still with us on one slot. In earlier comments, you mentioned the establishment of the AU Center for PCRD in Cairo. It's been described as a milestone. How truly significant is it?
We're still freshly establishing the center. So at the moment now, the main office, the main building is going to be in the new administrative capital of Cairo, which we popularly refer as New Cairo. That's where they are building the main infrastructure of the PCRD center. But temporarily, we have been assigned a small office for now in Cairo Doki area, where we are doing our operations and trying to create partnership with relevant institutions that are based in this in the part of the northern region of Africa. So that is it. The next phase is in terms of the recruitment, because now in terms of we're still at the operational phase of the center. So for the first one, we have the institutional building. Now the second is in terms of the structure itself, like in terms of the personnel. Currently, we're in the process of recruiting the first set of people for the center. We advertised already 15 positions on the AU website a long time ago. So now we're in the process of doing the shortlisting and the interviews for the different positions.
I know that there are a lot of work that still needs to be done, but it's been described as a milestone. I'd like you to tell us why its establishment is important in the policy framework, in making sure that what is contained in that policy comes to life.
If you recall, during my first set of intervention, if you recall, I had mentioned to you that the PCRD policy framework itself was adopted since 2006 in Banjul at the summit of July 2006. So you can imagine it took a long, and for this framework to be established, you needed to have an agency to be able to lead the implementation, or like as an institution to be able to lead the implementation of this framework, because the PCRD framework is a very, very broad, like you can see from the 6 pillars that we're having, is very broad in terms of its mandate and in terms of aspiration, as well as objective and goals it intends to achieve. So the policy being adopted in 2006 and the center finally being operationalized last year, December 2021, you can imagine how it took us at least 15 years for it. So it's a great milestone, because not only did it take the 15 years, but also because last year was also considered as the 15th anniversary of the PCRD policy since its adoption. So for it to be launched officially and inaugurated last year was, actually a big milestone, especially given the timeliness of the current issues happening on the continent now, on the need for an institutional framework to be able to help our countries recover from these issues they are going through now.
Okay, some progress has been made beyond this now, but some scholars are saying that putting the policy into practice has been difficult for many reasons, and one that is prominent is the sad relapse to conflict. Even the AU acknowledges that this is a challenge. When you make peace today, something comes up tomorrow and you're back to square one, it seems. What's your view on the nature of this challenge? And on the flip side of it as well, shouldn't this have been factored in during consultations before the framework was adopted?
Yeah, I mean, if you know how the African Union works, especially knowing that the African Union is a political organization and intergovernmental organization, you always know that things will not always work as planned. That's sometimes a factor, that's how things always go through. But it doesn't mean the will and the will, as well as the passion, as well as the force, is not there to do. But it's just that in an Africanized kind of institution, things take their time to get to where they are. For the PCRD policy, for us to believe that in terms of going forward, is going to be of good assistance a lot to not only it's not only for countries, like I mentioned to you earlier. The PCRD is also seen as a peace-building initiative for countries, for example, who have early warning system to be able to identify where they have lacunas and request support in the different domains where they want help from the African Union. So yes, it's been an issue in terms of implementing the PCRD policy framework because of basically, some few reasons which I'm going to elaborate. The first is little knowledge about the framework. To be honest with you, there are many Africans and even many of our member states who have little or no knowledge about the PCRD policy framework. So which means there was little, or if I may say, no sensitization or proper advocacy in terms of what this framework is, what this framework intends to achieve, and as well as where can we go with this framework going forward. A little about it. In terms of capacity building, most of our member states don't have the capacities, the requisite capacities, to be able to, like you mentioned earlier, the recurrence of some conflicts. In order for us to prevent the relapse of conflict, you need to have the proper capacity on the ground to be able to help the different institutions, the institutional framework, in the area of democracy, in the area of electoral expertise, in the area of good governance, in the area of transparency and accountability, in the area of leadership management. Once you don't have those capacities as well, of course, there's going to be relapse, because then you have people at the mantle of public offices who don't know how to dwell or who don't know how to manage things properly on a day-to-day basis. So it's basically polar capacity. 3, lack of funding. Funding is PCRD is not cheap. To be able to achieve PCRD, you need to fund, and for you to fund, you need to put the will, and you need to put that passion, and you need to put the commitment to it. So Yeah, you cannot be adopting a policy and then you don't put the proper funds the proper funds for us to be able to do our work. Because do recovery to also to develop, and when I mean development, I mean sustainable development, you need to put in the proper funding.
That question is that comment you're making is very important. I was actually going to dedicate a whole question to it much later, but I'd like you to expand on that conversation of funding, because to be sincere, without the required money, not much can be achieved, no matter how laudable is it. What is the AU doing to find some sort of permanent channel for funding to come in, and what role does international community play here?
Oh, at the level of the AU, a lot is being done to be able to facilitate such interventions into proper intervention through having the proper funding. For example, we have what we call the Peace Fund. The Peace Fund is supposed to be launched hopefully soon, once we meet the prescribed criteria for it to be able to start to operationalize the Peace Fund. We have what we call the emergency response mechanism within the African Union, where we assist and respond to such crises within time limits. So this emergency response mechanism actually is it's a mechanism which is actually funded by partners, multilateral partners such as the EU and other relevant partners who dwell in the issues of peace, security, and good governance, democracy, and all of that. We have those different mechanisms, and of course, we even have what we call the peace support operations to that effect as well, that help and everything. But in terms of why the funding has been low, I can also say that the past 3 years have in terms of the COVID impact, the funding has been really, really very minimal as compared to in the past. The funding is very minimal, and of course, you understand that our member states are fighting multiple war fronts in terms of course, the pandemic. All our regions now, as you can see, most of all the 5 regions now are conflicted with terrorism one way or the other. Coupled now with the COVID-19 pandemic, where our economies are trying to recover and everything. So, of course, the union now is going through what we call austerity measures since 2020. We're in austerity measures. So that gives that brings us that the challenge to get the requisite funds to be able to support that process. But we're not giving up, and that is why we are going via the route of engaging with partners as well, because we have our conventional partners, our traditional partners that have been with the union for more than 50 years, going 50 years down the road, who support us in these processes, and we have put it to them. And a lot of partners are interested. And like I told you, the PCRD is now properly visible and is now properly engaged because we have now the institutional framework that is the institution to be able to implement the framework. And that is why now in the past 3-4 years, there has been a lot of emphasis on the PCRD and its importance in terms of how we can go far, how we can support member states in terms of recovery and development, and above all, peace building, and above all, how we can be there to make sure that member states learn from each other in such processes. So, yeah.
Okay. You're doing a lot, noted, but there is the skeptic that will say, how are we feeling it? Because sometimes agreements that are reached doesn't seem to stand. Conflicts reoccur. What is the long-term approach? Applying the policy itself to ensure that there is no relapse. Is it even possible to stop a relapse to violence?
Yes, it's possible to stop a relapse to violence. I mean, look at Côte d'Ivoire. Where are they now? Look at Côte d'Ivoire. Look at Côte d'Ivoire from 2010 to when they had the issues, and then the ADB had to leave, and the ADB came back. Look at now. It's almost now more than a decade. Yeah, more than a decade now. Look at Côte d'Ivoire. They are doing good. They are progressing towards recovery, social development. If you go to Abidjan now, you will see the level of development that is happening there in terms of even the other cities, Yamoussoukro and all of that, you see. So it's possible. Like I said, it's all about basically 4 things. The political will is the most important. The political will. The second thing you have to do a political will. The second thing is everyone has to be on board. You cannot be doing PCRD and then you only involve a few set of people, because at the end of the day, you are talking about reconstructing the whole nation from the grassroots level. So all tribes, everyone needs to be on board. Traditional authorities, the citizens, the local people, all of them need to be on board in these processes. That's number two. Number three, you have to avail the funding, provide the requisite funding, develop proper resource mobilization strategy where you can be able to mobilize funds for such purposes and all of that. Three, improve on our coordination. Stop working in silos. When you improve in coordination in terms, you realize it in some countries, at sub-regional level, they don't really speak to you in terms of development plans and strategies. So how do you improve the coordination? Tapping onto the experience of other countries as well to support you in these things. Knowledge management, knowledge sharing.
Yeah, one key thing you've mentioned there is the coordination, not working in silos, is very important. So you know what the other people are doing and you can learn from it. Always, the goal is how we can do better. We're going to break now. When we come back, we will look at why sustainable, successful post-conflict reconstruction seems to elude Africa, and importantly, ways we can go about addressing the issues. Stay with us. Good to have you with us. Let's continue with the conversation on the PCD, PCRD, that's the Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Development for Africa. It is a collective work to rebuild, and it's a mixture of different factors beyond the AU and its commitment to bringing peace to Africa. My question to Kevino is, how has the international community assisted Africa's post-conflict efforts?
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that question. So, in terms of our collaboration and our involvement in work with the international community, I think it's important to know that first of all, the international partners have always been with the AU along the route in terms of country management, and it's been in terms of management of good governance and everything in the continent. That's one fact which I think is important to first of all mention and highlight here. But the international community has always been with the African Union while doing interventions in terms of conflicts and conflict management or prevention of conflicts in countries. Now, how have they supported us? They have supported us in many ways. I will take, for example, in the area of prevention of conflict, for example, specifically in the domain of democracy and elections, we have partners who have supported us in that process. For example, in terms of doing our pre-assessments before any elections happens and all of that. So they have helped us in terms of not only technical capacity, but as well as funding, so that we can be able to deliver on those thematic areas properly. They have also helped us in terms of promoting the values and norms of democracy, such as, for example, through the initiation and development of specific programs such as political party programming, what we call, where we try to make sure that political parties are well abreast of the processes and stop being kind of bringing disorders instead of bringing disorder during electoral processes and all of that. In terms of course, management of conflict, we have a lot of partners who have supported us. Our peace support operations are actually also supported most often, like even more than half, over 50% sometimes by international partners, specifically the European Union. Our different, even sometimes the different experts, we hire, such as human rights observers. Sometimes you see human rights observers that are there in countries going through conflict. Most often all the time, 70% of these contingents come from the support, the financial support and technical support from partners. Okay,
I mean, a lot. They're doing a lot, obviously.
They're doing a lot.
It seems I'm always looking for the challenges, but I'm still going to ask. Many interventions in Africa, in collaboration with different parties, are said to attempt to stop ongoing violence, but oftentimes they fail to address the root causes of the conflict. Is it even possible, considering that sometimes it's a mesh of different complaints? You deal with one, another comes up, and then it goes back. Is it possible? I know I've asked you this question before, but is it that it is a failure to address the root cause of the conflict that make us have this recurrent violence?
To be honest with you, most often than not, yes, it's an issue about addressing the root cause of conflict. Like I told you, like I mentioned earlier, once you are given that opportunity for a ceasefire and the opportunity to have a transition and everything. So for me, it's simple. You need to when you come on the terrain to meet all these different parties, the different stakeholders, and all of whether it's CSOs, the positions, and all of that. Like I said, you need to take in the points of views, you need to take in the aspirations, you need to take in the ideas and of everyone. Because at the end of the day, you are here to rebuild, you are here to recover, and you're here to develop. In the sense of not to rebuild or recover or develop what was there before. No. You actually have to improve on what was there so that you can be better and not relapse. So you focusing on specific people specific people, or let's say specific parties or specific groups and everything for ideas and everything, and leaving behind others, that's an issue. That's what I'm saying. So basically, all the time, most often all the time, it's issues of not addressing or not actually identifying properly the grassroots causes of conflicts would always tend to bring a relapse to such conflicts. So that's my point of view.
Okay. Do you align with suggestions that there is a need to review the APCRD approaches to match the current nature of conflict in Africa? When I talk about conflict, I mean beyond the violence, you have climate change, you have natural disasters and all of that. If yes, what would be your suggestion as to how to go about it?
Actually, just to give you a positive feedback, actually, we're actually in the process of reviewing the PCRD policy framework, because we have already identified that these are the things, there are a lot of things that are missing. Like I mentioned to you earlier, the PCRD framework was adopted more than a decade ago,
yes,
2016, and we're already 16 years after. So 2006, the issues of 2006, the context of 2006 can't be the context after 10 years or after 16 years as we are now. The contexts are different. Like you mentioned earlier, issues of climate change, climate security, we are looking at it. How does, for example, issues of erosion, issues of flood and everything affect the security of the citizens where these refugees will migrate? Because then, when they migrate to such places, then we have to now manage the limited resources they have there. If you don't manage it properly, it can lead to another crisis, and so on and so forth. So, of course, yes, we have to take in the nexus of climate security, issues of course, flooding, natural causes, issues of cyber security. In Africa, is an issue. It's an area where we have very limited capacity. So all those elements are things we are considering in the new policy, PCRD policy framework. So you can be rest assured, it's a process that we have started, and also it was mandated by our policy organs. And when I mean our policy organs, I mean the Assembly of Heads of State who requested for this PCRD to be reviewed. So you can be rest assured that our heads of state, our political leaders are aware of this, and that is what they have mandated us to do what is needful. Thank you.
Yeah, from your work, you've been at the AU for a bit. From what you've seen that's being done, how can AU effort in implementing post-conflict reconstruction be further enhanced?
One simple response for you to that. You have to properly involve the regional economic communities and the regional mechanisms, because the RECs and RMs, they form part and parcel of the African Union. They are actually the pillars of the African Union. So one of the things, in order for it to be properly implemented, you cannot implement a continental policy when the regional economic forces, the regional economic communities, they themselves are not empowered, are not even properly abreast about the policy. That's number one. Two, the regional economic and the regional mechanisms need to also develop regional PCRD policies, which will be able to address what they have in their context, because the issues in West Africa will not be the same as Central Africa or North Africa or Southern or Eastern. That is why in one of the things we are trying to assist member states in the PCRD is actually for them to develop their regional PCRD framework for those who don't have, and for those who have, to be able to align theirs with the continental PCRD framework. We did that last year. We supported IGAT, we're in the process. We're supporting the East African community, and also we're supporting the ECAS, Economic Community for Central African States. We're supporting all of those communities so that they can be abreast of this peace and they can support the AU, because you have to understand something. At the moment, the African Union, the Commission of the African Union, AUC, if I may say so, because the PCRD is not yet fully operationalized, and given that we still operate under the umbrella of the Commission, the mandate is basically to advise member states, develop policies for member states to be able to implement at national level and all of that. So that's where we stop. Now, the RECs and RMs are there to help us implement and, of course, disseminate and of course.
But no matter how fine it is on paper, without implementation, everything is null. I want to say thank you very much, Kevino, for speaking with us.
Yeah. Thank you very much as well for the opportunity. Thank you.
For me, any effort at peace building is welcome. And while bodies like the AU continue to fine-tune necessary mechanisms to reflect evolving dynamics, we can show support by bringing attention to the work that's being done. Beyond the criticism and constructive review, it is also a way to say, we see you, we appreciate you, to everyone committed to Africa's post-conflict reconstruction and development efforts. Thank you for the work that you do. I guess that's a good place to leave today's program. Thank you, as always, for watching. I look forward to your company next Tuesday. Until then, please stay safe.